Thank you, Julie, for those prayers. Let me read today's passage for you before the sermon. This comes from Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 48. Now, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman who was there, who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her, she came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." It's my privilege today to introduce our speaker, who is the sixth president of Fuller Seminary. Both myself and Pastor Jeff are alumni of Fuller and are deeply appreciative of the education and the training that we received here. Dr. David Emmanuel Goatley will be speaking today. You should have seen the announcement last week from one of our hosts. She says he has his full legal name up there, so you know he's got to be important. And his name has goat in it, so of course he has to be the goat. So I will echo that. But Dr. David Emmanuel Goatley has a heart for the church, a heart for mission, a heart for justice, and I'm excited that he is here today to share his heart with us. Let's welcome up Dr. David Emmanuel Goatley.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pastor Wade, for your generous introduction and for the privilege of being able to be here and worship with you today. I'm grateful whenever I have a chance to meet Fuller alumni, wherever they are around the world, more than 20,000 alumni around the world who are serving in different ways. And we're thankful to be a part of what God is doing all around the world. So we are blessed, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm also grateful my colleague, Professor P.C. Lowe, who is here with us. He is the Dean and Rebecca Stephan Chair of Chinese Studies and the Dean of our Chinese Studies Center at Fuller Seminary. And I'm grateful for his leadership and our being together. I'm grateful for the Ministry of Hospitality. From the time we entered, we were greeted with smiles and welcome, and we are thankful for that spirit. When you travel a lot, sometimes you're a stranger when you arrive, and you're a stranger while you're there, and you're a stranger when you leave. And unless the Lord makes me, I'll never go back anymore. But I'm grateful for the spirit of hospitality that you shared with us and with others in this place. I want to invite you to gather with me around this subject today, the power of a touch. There are few people in the world, more men than women, who live with a challenge called color blindness. It's a small percentage of people, but it does affect the way that they see the world. Sometimes people with color blindness are unable to tell the difference between one color and another. They cannot distinguish, for example, between green and red, or blue and yellow. There are others who they have a hard time seeing the gradation. They can't tell the difference between something that is a soft pink and a bright red. For others, everything looks monochrome or gray. They're not able to see the differences, and that's how they inhabit the world. There are other people who have something akin to color blindness, where they're not able to tell the difference between one thing or another, or the gradation between. One example is love and lust. Some people are confused between the two. They don't understand that lust is about satisfying oneself, and love is about investing my life into another for their flourishing. They don't understand that lust is very short-term and intense, but love is a long, flourishing future. They get confused and use one word for the other. In the lives of some churches, it wouldn't be the case for the community church here, but in other churches around the world, they confuse mission and maintenance. There are some who think that continuing the program last year for this year is what is most important. Or what we did 10 years ago is what we should be doing today, and they long for the good old days. Rather than being committed to being missional, where they're discerning where God is drawing them into the world, where they're committed to organizing their time and their efforts and their prayers for engaging people with the transforming love of Jesus Christ. And they get confused. And it becomes difficult sometimes when you're trying to engage in the mission of where God is sending us, and others are stuck in what we used to do. That's a kind of difficulty of discerning what is the difference. Likewise, there are some people who have a hard time distinguishing between a push and a touch. And we see it and experience it in the whole world, and we experience it also in sometimes close-in relationships and even personal experiences. I want to say two things. First is there is no power in a push, but there is power in a touch. All of us probably have been around people, maybe we are some of them, who find ourselves pushing people around, exercising our power. It sometimes is characterized by manipulation, and it's so easy to see now with social media and algorithms that it's easier now perhaps to be manipulated than in another time. Playing mind games on people or providing misinformation so that we can get people to do what we want them to do, that's a push. And there's really no power, no long-term transformation in a push. A push is sometimes characterized by intimidation. Because somebody has power or privilege or prestige, and they impose that on another to get someone to go along with what they want to do. Most of us who are adults have witnessed it. Some of us may have been guilty of using our privilege or using our authority in ways that have imposed our will on other people. Sometimes a push is characterized by exploitation. All major cities in the world experience and have seen the exploitation of the poor, the exploitation of women and children. people being forced into activities that do not honor their dignity and their creation in the image of God. And there are people who try to push themselves and their will on others through manipulation and through intimidation and through exploitation. While some people will accommodate themselves to that, there is no power, there is no lasting transformation in a push. But there is power in a touch. A touch is characterized by humility and integrity and sincerity. Pastor read for us this text from Luke, and it's also printed, and I hope that you reflect on it. That Jesus is moving and there is a crowd around, and he has an agenda. He's on his way to the house of Jairus, a synagogue leader, because Jairus' daughter was dying. So Jesus was on his way to minister, on his way to a destination. The crowd was around him. It says that the crowds almost crushed him. We were coming over this morning on the metro, and it was a lot of people there. But I'm sure not like rush hour, where there's just, you've been in it, when there's just a crush, you can barely move. And I imagine there was something like that. The crowd was all around Jesus. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, the text says. No one could heal her. And she came up behind Jesus in the crush of the crowd and touched just the edge of his cloak. And immediately, the text says, her bleeding stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Peter responds, "Master, these are people on the Hong Kong metro line. The people are pressing in against you." But Jesus says, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." And then the woman tells her story. And Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." There is power in a touch. A touch has humility. The woman did not try to stop Jesus from what Jesus was already committed to doing. Perhaps you've experienced that, or perhaps you've been one where because you have an agenda, you want somebody else to stop to satisfy your agenda. It doesn't matter what they're doing. But whatever they're doing, you want them to stop to attend to your issue. That was not what she was trying to do. She did not try to interrupt what Jesus was doing. She was just trying to access the possibility of healing power. Humility. She didn't need the world to revolve around her. She just needed to get close to the one whom the world revolves around. Her touch was one of integrity. It was honesty and vulnerability. And there are some of us, I'm born and live in the United States, so I'll talk about us. I don't know what you experience in Hong Kong. But where I live, there are some people who are not able to be honest about their needs. They try to inhabit the world as if they are self-sufficient and independent rather than being interdependent and reliant upon healthy relationships where they can experience mutuality and reciprocity, where they can be present and helpful for others, and then they can know that others can be helpful and present for them. Here she expressed her vulnerability, her need for the one who has more power than anyone else. And in these weeks after the resurrection of Jesus, we live in the power of the resurrection. And we need to own that and submit ourselves to the power of Christ. So not only was her touch one of humility and integrity, it was also one of sincerity. She was genuine about her need. She was not living behind a facade where there is an appearance that all was well, but on the inside, everything was difficult. Perhaps if you remember some of the international news several years ago, it was in 2005 in the United States, and there was a hurricane named Katrina that was very devastating in the southern United States. And I remember being there on a mission assignment, and we stopped in front of what we thought was a church. It was a building, and it still had the doors closed. But what we discovered is if you walked just to one side, you discovered there was no building there, only the facade, only the front. But everything else had collapsed. And as long as you stood directly in front of where the doors were, you thought it was a building. But with further investigation, you discovered it was only a facade, only a front, that there was nothing there. And there are many people in the world today who are living behind facades. And we need to have the kind of sincerity, the kind of vulnerability to know that what we need, we cannot access on our own, but what we need is the power that comes from an encounter with Jesus. And so Jesus knew the difference between a push and a touch, but Peter didn't. Remember, Peter says, Master, the crowd is crushing you, and you're asking who touched you? He didn't understand the difference between a push and a touch. He just knew about proximity, but he did not understand that there is a difference between an imposition and an invitation. The woman was not trying to impose her will. It was an invitation that if you can, even while you're caring for someone else, I would desire to access your healing power that is in the life of Jesus. You see, in a sense, the disciples were colorblind, in a sense. They could not distinguish between one and the other, or they could not distinguish between the gradation. They thought that proximity was the same as a touch. Something like the mother of James and John, who asked Jesus to do for her what she asked. That she asked that my sons will have places of honor in your kingdom. Let one sit on the right, one sit on the left. Because of her proximity to Jesus, she thought she might be able to extract something from it. That was a push rather than a touch. It was not the kind of invitation for what the Lord would have. There was a occasion some years ago in one of the large cities in the United States, in Chicago, Illinois. And it was during a time of a heightened tragedy of substance abuse and addiction. And there were a number of babies that were being born to mothers who were addicted to drugs. The mothers knew that they did not have the capacity to raise the children in the ways that they needed to be raised. And so there was a large number of babies then who were left at the hospital so that the hospital could provide and try to find homes for these children because their mothers knew that they could not care for them. And the nursery was overwhelmed with the babies and trying these infants, and they had special needs and they needed to be fed and they needed to be cared for, but there were not enough people. So what they did, they started recruiting volunteers just to sit in rocking chairs and hold and feed the infants. And what they discovered is that the more that the infants were held and fed, the better they developed physically and psychologically. They were developing because of the touch of a human. There was something transformative about the proximity of someone who was not trying to impose on them, but to care for them. There is no power in a push. We live in a world where so many people try to impose their wills on us, impose their wills to how we think and how we behave and how we feel. But there is another alternative. That alternative comes when we access the loving power of Jesus, both in our lives and through our lives to others. The disciples did not understand that there was a difference, but Jesus could feel what happens when the sincerity and vulnerability and the integrity of a touch connects with him. There is a hymn of another era that had these words. It said, "I was shackled by a heavy burden beneath a load of guilt and shame. But then the hand of Jesus touched me, and now I am no longer the same. He touched me. He touched me. And oh, the joy that floods my soul. Something happened, and now I know. He touched me and made me whole." There is power in a touch. And that power is available when we, with humility and sincerity and integrity, lean into Jesus, who is already leaning into us. And today, may we know the power of the risen Savior, what it means to reach out and experience his touch, to make us whole, and for us to extend that touch and the power of healing and hope in the church and in the world. Amen.